What happens when a love story the whole world admired suddenly unravels? When the couple who once stood hand in hand on red carpets, smiling under the flash of cameras, ends up standing on opposite sides of a courtroom. Nicole Kidman's confession is as raw as it is devastating. "He really broke my heart." These words don't come from just any woman. They come from an Oscar-winning actress who has spent decades navigating the spotlight with grace, from her dramatic rise in Hollywood to her carefully guarded private life. And yet, in the end, she found herself blindsided, betrayed, and told by the man she loved most that she was difficult to love. How does one recover from such a shattering blow? And more importantly, what led them to this heartbreaking moment? Let's not sugarcoat it. The story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban was supposed to be one of Hollywood's last true fairy tales. A glamorous actress at the height of her career, an Australian country star with charm and vulnerability, two worlds colliding in a romance that felt destined. They married in 2006, and for 19 years, they appeared unshakable. The tabloids loved them. Fans adored them. Industry insiders hailed them as proof that love could survive the chaos of fame. But now, with Nicole's shocking divorce filing in Nashville on September 30th, that dream has crumbled before our eyes. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about it. 19 years. Nearly 2 decades of shared memories, struggles, triumphs, and children. And it all comes crashing down in a few signed papers and a confession that slices to the bone. Nicole has revealed that she felt very betrayed, her trust shattered by the man she believed she'd grow old with. And then came the cruelest twist, hearing Keith Urban tell her she was difficult to love. Can you imagine hearing that from the very person you've devoted your life to? The one you supported through rehab, through career challenges, through every storm? The irony here is almost unbearable. Nicole, one of the most adored and admired women in the world, told she is difficult to love. If that can happen to her, what does that say about the fragility of love itself? Here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. Nicole didn't just lose her husband. She had to stand before the world, filing papers that outlined the disintegration of her marriage in cold, legal terms. Irreconcilable differences. That phrase is clinical, sterile. But behind those words lies a river of pain. A mother of 2 daughters, Sunday Rose, 17, and Faith Margaret, 14, now tasked with raising them under a shared parenting plan. Keith will reportedly have just 59 days with his daughters each year, while Nicole will have 306. A telling detail, don't you think? Custody arrangements don't just happen at random. They reveal something deeper about where the balance of the family has shifted, about who has been the anchor and who has drifted away. And here's something few people are talking about: the agreement that neither Nicole nor Keith can speak badly of the other or of any family members to their daughters. On paper, it's a noble clause. But doesn't it speak volumes about how bitter things must have already become? When lawyers need to step in to ensure parents don't poison their children's hearts, you know the relationship has soured beyond repair. And yet, Nicole still broke her silence with words that pierce through all the legal jargon. "I loved him until he told me I was difficult to love." That single statement is more powerful than 100 tabloid headlines. It's not just the end of a marriage. It's the sound of a heart breaking. But let's pause here and ask the question everyone is thinking. Why does this matter? Why should the public care about the private heartbreak of 2 celebrities? The truth is, Nicole's story resonates because it mirrors something universal. We've all experienced love that felt eternal until it wasn't. We've all faced betrayal, disappointment, or rejection. And for anyone who has been told they're too much or not enough, Nicole's words hit like a thunderclap. It makes us confront our own wounds, our own doubts, our own memories of times when love didn't save us the way we thought it would. And consider the timing. Nicole filed for divorce on September 30th, just one day after their separation became public. That speed tells us everything. This wasn't a quiet, reflective decision made after months of negotiations. This was decisive, urgent, and painful. The kind of decision you make when something breaks so deeply that you can't stand another day of pretending. Why the urgency? What was so unbearable that Nicole couldn't wait another week, another month, to make it official? That question alone hooks us into this story, demanding answers. And the more we look, the more we see this isn't just about divorce. It's about betrayal, power, and the crushing weight of words spoken in anger. Let's talk about those words again. Difficult to love. They linger. They echo. They haunt. Because once someone says them, you can't unhear them. You can't go back to the way things were. Nicole's confession suggests this wasn't just an offhand remark. It was the breaking point. And when a breaking point comes after 19 years, it doesn't just fracture the marriage. It shatters the foundation of identity. Imagine living nearly 2 decades believing you were cherished, supported, valued, only to discover the person you trusted most harbored such a devastating thought about you. That's not just heartbreak. That's devastation. But here's the cruel irony. While Nicole was reeling, the whispers began that Keith Urban had already moved on. That phrase, dropped so casually by sources, carries enormous weight. Moved on to what? Moved on to whom? Moved on from nearly 2 decades of shared life. Just like that? How do you move on so quickly from someone who once stood at your wedding altar and promised forever? Unless, of course, the process of moving on began long before the public knew anything. Unless the separation had been brewing behind closed doors, masked by the polished smiles of red carpets and interviews. This is where the story shifts from personal heartbreak to public spectacle. Because while Nicole bares her soul, admitting betrayal, Keith remains silent. His silence itself becomes part of the narrative. Silence can be dignified, or it can be damning. In contrast to Nicole's vulnerability, his silence leaves the world wondering, is he avoiding blame, or simply choosing not to defend himself? And in Hollywood, silence often speaks louder than words. So where does that leave us? With a confession that reveals a fractured marriage, a custody arrangement that speaks volumes, and a betrayal that has left one of Hollywood's brightest stars exposed and wounded. Nicole Kidman, the woman who has captivated audiences for decades, now stands before us not as an untouchable icon, but as a woman betrayed, a mother determined, and a human being shattered by words she'll never forget. And while this confession is devastating, it also makes her more relatable than ever before. Because if Nicole Kidman can have her heart broken, if she can be told she's difficult to love, then none of us are immune. And that, in itself, is a truth both terrifying and oddly comforting. But this is only the beginning of the story. Because what unfolded after Nicole's confession, the choices she made, the silence she broke, the whispers surrounding Keith Urban's next chapter, would send shockwaves through Hollywood and leave fans asking, was this truly the end of their love story, or just the beginning of a far darker chapter? It all started like a dream. Picture it. June 2006, a glowing Nicole Kidman walking down the aisle in her home city of Sydney, Australia, wearing a breathtaking Balenciaga gown, the whole world watching as she pledged her love to Keith Urban. He was the charismatic country music star from New Zealand who had broken into Nashville and America with charm, vulnerability, and undeniable talent. She was the Oscar-winning actress, fresh from her triumph in The Hours, carrying herself with an elegance that made her seem untouchable. Together, they looked like destiny incarnate. Didn't it feel, at that moment, like we were watching the creation of a modern-day fairy tale? The media adored it. The photos plastered across magazines, Nicole's radiant smile, Keith's nervous but proud demeanor. This wasn't just another Hollywood wedding. It was painted as fate, as though the universe itself had aligned to bring 2 stars from opposite ends of the entertainment world together. She had endured heartbreak before, most notably with Tom Cruise, and audiences rooted for her to finally have her happily ever after. And Keith? He was stepping into a new chapter, leaving behind a history of struggles and rising into the light of redemption with Nicole by his side. The love story wrote itself. But here's the uncomfortable truth about fairy tales. They rarely hold up in reality. From the very start, there were whispers. Keith's long-standing battle with addiction, Nicole's towering career, and the strain of balancing 2 demanding lives. Distance was a constant enemy, his tours pulling him to Nashville and beyond, her film sets taking her across the globe. Still, they made it work. At least, that's what the public believed. For years, they appeared united, arm in arm on red carpets. Warm glances exchanged under the glare of flashbulbs, tender moments captured that seemed too authentic to be staged. But were they? Or were they the polished surface of something far more fragile underneath? Consider this. Nicole had already been burned once before. Her marriage to Tom Cruise was not just a love story gone wrong. It was a very public implosion. She lost not only a husband, but also contact with two adopted children who aligned themselves with Cruise after the divorce. That kind of heartbreak leaves scars. So when she married Keith, she was determined. Determined to make it work. Determined to put family above everything else. Determined not to let another marriage unravel. And for a while, she succeeded. They had their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. Nicole seemed to step back from the Hollywood spotlight, picking her projects carefully, prioritizing her family. Keith, too, was seen as a devoted husband and father. Fans clung to their image as one of the rare celebrity couples who had beaten the odds. But as anyone who has lived through a long marriage knows, appearances don't always reflect reality. Behind closed doors, the pressures can build, resentment can fester, and words can cut deeper than any outsider would ever guess. Think about the weight of living in the public eye, every disagreement dissected, every absence noticed, every red carpet glance analyzed by strangers across the world. Imagine the pressure of having to keep smiling, keep holding hands, keep selling the illusion that everything was perfect, while inside, you might have been screaming. Doesn't that sound exhausting? Doesn't that sound like a recipe for cracks to appear, even in the strongest foundation? And cracks did appear. Keith's stints in rehab became headlines. Nicole's emotional interviews hinted at struggles behind the scenes, though she rarely spoke in detail. At one point, she admitted she didn't want to air dirty laundry, a statement that, in hindsight, feels like a warning. When someone refuses to share details, is it because there's nothing to tell, or because the truth is too painful, too humiliating, too dangerous to reveal? Let's not forget the irony here. Nicole Kidman, hailed as one of the greatest actresses of her generation, was playing the role of her life. The devoted wife who kept smiling, kept forgiving, kept supporting. Audiences believed the performance because they wanted to. We wanted to believe that love could endure, that Hollywood couples weren't all doomed, that Nicole had finally found the partner who would never let her down. But the truth was quietly brewing, hiding in the silences, in the late-night arguments, in the empty hotel rooms when Keith was away on tour, in the moments when Nicole perhaps wondered, is this really the life I signed up for? Ask yourself, how many of us have looked at someone else's relationship and thought, they have it all, and then, when it fell apart, realized we only ever saw the highlight reel, never the messy behind-the-scenes reality? That's what makes this story so magnetic. It's not just about Nicole and Keith. It's about the illusion of perfection, the belief in happily ever afters, and the gut punch that comes when reality shatters those illusions. And here's where the foreshadowing becomes chilling. Because in those early days, in the glow of romance, Nicole never could have imagined that one day Keith would look at her and say the words, "You're difficult to love." Words that now stand as the single most haunting legacy of their nearly two-decade marriage. How do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile the image of Keith standing at the altar in 2006, promising eternal devotion, with the image of him years later, delivering the cruelest blow of all? This is where their story transforms from a glittering fairy tale into a cautionary tale, because it shows us how love, no matter how grand, no matter how celebrated, can decay slowly, invisibly, until one day it crumbles completely. 19 years. A lifetime, really. And yet it ended not with a bang, but with a whisper that grew into a confession that became a legal filing, and a legal filing that ended a marriage. So let's go back, one last time, to that wedding in Sydney. The flowers, the music, the promises. The way Nicole's eyes glistened with hope, the way Keith held her hand as if he'd never let go. Remember that image. Because that's the image the world believed for nearly 2 decades. But behind that image, behind that dream, something else was waiting. Something darker. Something that would one day bring Nicole to confess, with tears in her eyes, that the man she had once believed was her soulmate had left her heart in pieces. And the shocking part? The cracks that would destroy everything were already there, even in the earliest days of their marriage. They were invisible then, hidden under the glow of love and hope. But those cracks were waiting for the moment they would split wide open and reveal the truth that no one saw coming. Because this wasn't just a love story. It was the beginning of a heartbreak that would shake Hollywood to its core. But Nicole's sacrifices, the choices she made to protect this marriage, would come to define the next chapter of her life. And as we peel back the layers, you'll see just how much she gave up in the name of love, and how those very sacrifices would one day be turned against her in the cruelest way possible. She gave everything for love. That's where we begin this chapter. Nicole Kidman, one of the most celebrated actresses of her generation, wasn't just a movie star. She was a woman willing to put her heart on the line, even if it meant reshaping her life. And when she married Keith Urban in 2006, she made a choice that would define the next 19 years. She put family first. But was it worth it? Or did those very sacrifices set the stage for the heartbreak that followed? Think about the Nicole Kidman we knew in the early 2000s. She had just walked away from her marriage to Tom Cruise, a divorce that shook Hollywood and left her vulnerable, yet strangely liberated. She wasn't just rebuilding, she was soaring. In 2003, she won the Academy Award for her portrayal of Virginia Woolf in The Hours. Roles in Moulin Rouge and Cold Mountain cemented her place as a global star. She was in demand, commanding millions per film, her face on magazine covers, her name synonymous with prestige. Nicole could have stayed on that path, basking in Hollywood dominance, taking every role that came her way. But she didn't. Instead, she made a choice. When Keith came into her life, Nicole slowed down. She shifted her priorities. She spoke openly about wanting children, about desiring the intimacy of family life after years of relentless career focus. For Keith, who had battled demons of his own, her commitment must have felt like salvation. Here was a woman willing to stand beside him, not just as a wife, but as a steadying anchor. And for Nicole, here was a man who made her feel adored in a way she hadn't felt in years. It looked like balance. But balance, as we now know, can tilt dangerously over time. Let's be real, marriage is about compromise. But how much compromise is too much? Nicole began stepping back from the endless stream of Hollywood roles. She moved her life to Nashville, embracing a quieter existence away from the paparazzi swarms of Los Angeles. For a woman who had lived under constant scrutiny, it seemed like a relief. Yet the irony is glaring. Even as she sought peace, her sacrifice meant leaving behind a part of herself. Can you imagine what it feels like to dim your own light, so someone else's can shine brighter? Have you ever given up a dream, thinking it was for love, only to later wonder if love demanded too much? Nicole's sacrifices weren't just professional. They were deeply personal. She poured herself into motherhood, raising Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret with devotion. She attended Keith's concerts, often seen supporting him from the wings, cheering him on, glowing with pride. She gave him stability, a home, a family unit to ground him when his touring schedule threatened to pull him in 1,000 directions. But while Nicole was grounding Keith, who was grounding Nicole? That's the question no one asked back then. Because the public was too busy admiring the fairy tale image, the glamorous actress and the country superstar, hand in hand, seemingly invincible. And let's not forget, Keith wasn't without his struggles. Just months into their marriage, he entered rehab for substance abuse. Nicole stood by him. Think about that for a moment. A newlywed bride, still supposed to be in the honeymoon glow, instead confronting her husband's demons head-on. She could have walked away then. Many would have. But she didn't. She doubled down on her loyalty, her commitment. She told herself love could conquer it all. And maybe she believed that if she just gave enough, sacrificed enough, she could keep the marriage safe. But here's where the tragedy lies. Sacrifices in love aren't always reciprocated. Sometimes they're taken for granted. Sometimes they become invisible. Over time, Nicole's decision to put family before career became less a choice and more an expectation. Keith continued to tour, to thrive in his music career, often gone for long stretches. Nicole, meanwhile, built her life around his rhythm. Can you imagine what that does to someone's sense of self? To know that the world sees you as the strong one, the stable one, while inside, you're wondering if anyone sees the cost you're paying? There's a cruel irony here. Nicole Kidman, adored by millions, honored with awards, respected by her peers, was still fighting for validation within her own marriage. She loved him fiercely, gave him everything, and yet, one day he told her she was difficult to love. Think about that contradiction. The same woman who sacrificed roles, fame, and endless opportunities for the sake of her marriage was told she was difficult to love. Doesn't that sting? Doesn't it feel like the ultimate betrayal? And let's take this further. What message does that send to anyone watching? That even if you give everything, it might not be enough. That even if you build your life around someone else's needs, they might still turn around and call you difficult. Nicole's pain isn't just personal, it's universal. Because how many of us have been there? How many of us have poured ourselves into a relationship, only to be met with criticism instead of gratitude? But here's another layer. The world didn't know the extent of Nicole's sacrifices until recently. She rarely spoke about the compromises she made. She kept her dignity, her silence. She played the role of the devoted wife, even as whispers of trouble began to swirl. Looking back now, doesn't that silence almost feel like foreshadowing? Like she was holding back a storm that would eventually erupt? The truth is, Nicole Kidman's sacrifices were monumental. She gave her marriage everything she had, her time, her career, her energy, her heart. But sacrifice without reciprocity can become a trap. And in Nicole's case, it was a trap that left her vulnerable to the cruelest words a spouse could utter. So here's the haunting question. Did Nicole's sacrifices save her marriage for nearly 2 decades? Or did they only delay the inevitable heartbreak? Were they the glue that held everything together, or the weight that dragged her down until she could no longer carry it? And if Nicole Kidman, an actress with strength, resilience, and global admiration, could give so much and still be told she was difficult to love, what hope does that leave for the rest of us? This is where the story turns darker. Because while Nicole was sacrificing, while she was pouring herself out for Keith, there was another battle happening quietly in the background, one that would expose just how fragile their love story really was. And it all centered on Keith Urban's struggles that Nicole thought she could help him overcome, but which would instead begin to erode the foundation of everything they had built together. He was the charming country star with the world at his feet, but behind the bright lights of the stage and the thunder of applause, Keith Urban was a man wrestling with shadows. Addiction, loneliness, the ghosts of a past that refused to let go. And for Nicole Kidman, loving him meant stepping into that darkness, hoping that her light would be enough to guide him out. But what happens when love alone isn't enough? What happens when the very demons you thought you could fight together become the cracks that weaken the foundation of your marriage? Let's go back to those early days of their union. On the surface, it was bliss. Keith was on fire musically. Nicole was basking in the glow of newfound happiness. But barely 4 months into their marriage, Keith checked into rehab for alcohol abuse. For months. Think about that. Most couples at that stage are still in the honeymoon haze, still discovering the joys of building a life together. For Nicole, instead of champagne toasts and romantic getaways, she was confronted with the harsh reality that the man she had married was fighting for his very life against addiction. Now, here's the crucial point. Nicole didn't run. She didn't file for divorce. She didn't even step back. She leaned in. Publicly, she stood by him. Privately, she fought for him. She became his rock when he couldn't stand. For the tabloids, it was the perfect image of devotion. A glamorous actress sacrificing red carpets for hospital visits, loyalty shining through the cracks of scandal. But let's be honest, behind that devotion lay exhaustion. Anyone who has ever loved someone battling addiction knows the emotional toll it takes. You're not just loving the person, you're battling the disease alongside them. And often, the disease fights harder than you ever could. Addiction is cunning. It steals trust, little by little. It whispers doubts into the cracks of a marriage. Imagine Nicole, waiting for Keith to come home, wondering if he'd been drinking, wondering if this time he'd stay sober, wondering if her love could hold back the tide. How long before that kind of vigilance begins to erode the joy in a relationship? How long before devotion begins to feel like duty? And here's where it gets even more complicated. Keith's career thrived, despite the shadows. His fans adored his vulnerability, his honesty in music, his story of redemption. Nicole saved me, he once said in interviews, crediting her with helping him through his darkest times. But isn't there something tragic in that statement? Because while the world applauded Nicole for saving Keith, who was saving Nicole? Who was carrying her when the weight of his struggles grew too heavy? There's a dangerous imbalance in that kind of relationship. When one person becomes the savior, the caretaker, the fixer, love starts to blur into responsibility. And over years, responsibility can curdle into resentment. Did Keith ever realize that? Did he ever look at Nicole and see not just his wife, but a woman sacrificing her own dreams and happiness to hold his world together? Or did he, as his later words suggest, begin to view her as difficult to love? The irony cuts deep. Because if Nicole was difficult to love, wasn't it partly because she had been forced into roles no wife should carry alone? Supporter, guardian, therapist, savior. Those roles may earn applause in public, but in private, they strip away intimacy. They turn love into a battlefield where one partner is constantly fighting for both. And no matter how strong Nicole is, and she is strong, the cracks from those battles left scars. Now let's talk about Keith's silence. Throughout their marriage, and especially in the unraveling, Keith often said less than Nicole. He let the music speak for him. He let performances stand as proof of his resilience. But silence is dangerous. Because when one partner opens their heart and the other retreats into quiet, distance grows. Nicole's vulnerability clashed with Keith's guardedness. Can you imagine pouring your soul out to someone who only gives you fragments in return? This is where the betrayal begins to take shape, not necessarily in infidelity, but in emotional absence. Nicole's confession that Keith told her she was difficult to love doesn't sound like a single cruel comment. It sounds like the culmination of years of unresolved tension, years of sacrifices unnoticed, years of carrying burdens that were never hers to carry. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was Keith's way of projecting his own battles, his own feelings of unworthiness, onto her. But let's not let him off the hook too easily. Addiction may explain struggles, but it doesn't excuse cruelty. And for Nicole, standing by a man she loved, only to be met with rejection cloaked in a single devastating sentence, must have been unbearable. That's why her words resonate so deeply. I loved him until he told me I was difficult to love. You can hear the exhaustion in that line. The sense of a woman who gave everything, only to be told it wasn't enough. So here's the question. Were Keith's struggles the beginning of the end? Or were they simply the accelerant, the spark that ignited deeper issues waiting to surface? It's tempting to frame this story as Nicole's sacrifice versus Keith's addiction, but the truth is messier. It's about two people, both wounded, both carrying scars, trying to build a marriage on uneven ground. And when ground is uneven, it doesn't matter how beautiful the house looks from the outside. It's only a matter of time before it collapses. And yet, even with all this darkness, Nicole stayed for 19 years. 19 years of fighting, forgiving, rebuilding, hoping. That tells us something important. It tells us she truly believed in the power of love. It tells us she wanted this marriage to work, no matter the cost. But love, no matter how fierce, cannot fight alone. And as we'll see in the next chapter, one phrase, uttered at the wrong time, in the wrong way, can shatter even the strongest love. Because the moment Keith told Nicole she was difficult to love, the battle shifted. It wasn't just about addiction anymore. It wasn't about sacrifice or redemption. It became about identity, about worth, about whether a woman who gave everything could ever be seen as enough. And that sentence, those 4 words, would become the turning point that no one could come back from. You're difficult to love. For words that landed like a hammer blow on Nicole Kidman's heart, shattering nearly 2 decades of loyalty, sacrifice, and devotion. Imagine it. The man you stood by through addiction, the man you left Hollywood behind to build a family with, the man you supported when the world doubted him. Turning to you and uttering a phrase that strips you bare. It's more than cruel. It's annihilating. And for Nicole, it was the moment everything changed. Let's not underestimate the power of words. Sticks and stones may break bones, but words, especially when they come from someone you love, can haunt you forever. What does difficult to love even mean? It's vague, slippery, impossible to pin down. It could mean anything. Too demanding, too emotional, too independent, too successful. It's a phrase designed to wound without explanation, to make the person hearing it question themselves endlessly. Can you imagine lying awake at night, replaying that phrase, asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Was I not enough? Or was I too much? Nicole's confession that she loved him until he told me I was difficult to love tells us everything. She didn't stop loving because of time, or distance, or boredom. She stopped because the foundation of her love was destroyed in one brutal moment. It's the kind of statement that rips the curtain away from any illusion of stability. Because if Keith truly saw her as difficult to love, then what had the last 19 years meant? Were they built on lies? On resentment? On quiet disdain he never voiced until it boiled over? This phrase carries a deeper irony too. Nicole Kidman, an Oscar-winning actress adored by millions, a woman with timeless beauty, grace, and resilience, was told she was hard to love. Think about that contradiction. The same woman who walked into rooms and commanded respect, who had directors begging to work with her, who had fans across the globe hanging on her every performance, was told by her husband that she was somehow unworthy of the most basic human need, love. Doesn't that sting for you too? Doesn't it feel like if she could be told that, anyone could? But here's the cruelest twist. That phrase didn't just attack Nicole's heart, it attacked her identity. Because Nicole had built her life around love. She wasn't the actress chasing endless roles. She was the woman who had said again and again that family was her anchor, her reason for everything. She had lost one family before. Her children with Tom Cruise distanced themselves after her divorce from him. She poured all her energy into creating a new one with Keith. And then, after years of being the rock, she's told she's difficult to love. It's almost biblical in its cruelty. Let's pause and ask, where does a statement like that come from? Was Keith projecting his own struggles onto her? Was it said in a moment of anger, a careless blow in the heat of an argument? Or was it a confession of something he had quietly felt for years? That's the devastating part. We'll never truly know. But for Nicole, it didn't matter. Once those words were spoken, they couldn't be unsaid. And let's think about what it says about their dynamic. For years, Nicole had been the strong one, the steady one. She stood by Keith when he went to rehab. She raised their daughters with grace. She put her career second to his, moving her life to Nashville, stepping into his world. She bent over backward to make their marriage work. And yet, in the end, she was told she was too much. How does that add up? Isn't that the ultimate betrayal? To give everything and still be told you're not easy to love? This moment, this bombshell, wasn't just a cruel sentence. It was a breaking point. You can almost feel Nicole's heart snapping as she heard it. Because love isn't just about passion or chemistry. It's about feeling safe, feeling valued, feeling like you are enough. And when that safety is destroyed, when the person you trust most turns around and tells you you're too difficult, the walls come crumbling down. Nicole's silence for years makes sense now, doesn't it? She wasn't just protecting her marriage from gossip. She was protecting herself from a truth too painful to admit. But once it slipped out, once Keith said it, she couldn't protect the illusion anymore. The betrayal was too deep. And her confession, "I loved him until he told me I was difficult to love," became her truth. Here's the part that hits hardest. Nicole wasn't the first woman to hear words like these, and she won't be the last. That's why this story resonates. How many women, how many men, have heard something similar from someone they adored? You're too much. You're not enough. You're hard to love. These are the phrases that scar us, that echo long after the relationship ends. And when they come from the lips of someone you've built your life around, they don't just hurt, they destroy. Let's not forget the ripple effect. Nicole isn't just a wife, she's a mother. Her daughters will feel the weight of this too, even if no one speaks it aloud. Children sense heartbreak. They sense tension. They sense when their mother has been wounded, even if she never tells them why. And in Nicole's case, the custody arrangement granting her 306 days and Keith just 59 suggests something significant. It suggests that when it came time to put their lives into legal terms, Nicole was seen as the stable force, the constant. The one who wasn't difficult to love, at least not in the eyes of her children. And yet, for Nicole, those words will linger. Because you can win custody. You can win Oscars. You can win the admiration of the world. But when the person you gave 19 years to tells you you're difficult to love, it cuts deeper than any award or accolade can heal. So what do we make of this? Was Keith's statement a reflection of Nicole or a reflection of himself? Because often, when someone lashes out with a phrase like that, they're revealing more about their own shortcomings than the other person's. Maybe Keith was overwhelmed by his own struggles, his own guilt, his own inability to match Nicole's loyalty and sacrifices. Maybe difficult to love was really, "I can't love you the way you deserve, and instead of admitting that, I'll make it your fault." Doesn't that sound familiar? Haven't we all seen people turn their failings into accusations against the very people who tried to love them the most? And here's the chilling part. This wasn't just an argument. It wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was the moment that changed everything. The moment Nicole's heart shifted from hope to heartbreak. The moment she realized the marriage she had fought so hard to save was already gone. But this story doesn't end here. Because words like those don't just wound, they spark action. And for Nicole, that action came swiftly. Within days, she filed for divorce in Nashville, ending 19 years with a few signed papers. And in those papers, hidden between the lines of legal jargon, lay the story of betrayal, broken trust, and the final unraveling of a love that had once seemed indestructible. Because the bombshell wasn't just the phrase, difficult to love. The bombshell was what came next, the divorce filing that exposed the fractures in their marriage for the whole world to see. And once those papers hit the court, there was no going back. September 30th, Nashville, Tennessee. A date that will forever be etched into the timeline of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's love story. Not as a celebration, not as an anniversary, but as the day everything officially fell apart. The filing of divorce papers. Cold, clinical documents that reduced nearly 2 decades of shared life into black ink on white paper. And while the legal jargon may have read like routine, behind every phrase was heartbreak, betrayal, and the painful acknowledgement that their fairy tale had ended. Let's start with the shock of the timing. Nicole filed the very day after their separation became public knowledge. Think about that for a second. That means there was no waiting period, no time spent quietly negotiating behind the scenes while the media speculated. No, Nicole acted with precision. One day the world hears they've separated. The next day, divorce papers in court. What does that tell us? It tells us she was ready. She wasn't dabbling in hesitation. She wasn't clinging to hope. Something inside her had broken, and once it broke, there was no gluing it back together. Now, the papers themselves. Irreconcilable differences. 2 words that appear on thousands of divorce filings. But in this case, they carry a weight that feels devastating. It's such a sterile phrase, isn't it? Clinical, detached, almost indifferent. But beneath it lies a truth Nicole couldn't put into public detail. That Keith Urban, her husband of 19 years, had told her she was difficult to love. How do you fit a wound like that into 2 words? How do you condense betrayal, disappointment, and heartbreak into legal terminology? You can't. And that's what makes these papers so haunting. They hide far more than they reveal. And then there's the parenting plan. Nicole and Keith's daughters, Sunday Rose, 17, and Faith Margaret, 14, are not just footnotes to this divorce. They are the heart of it. The documents state Nicole will have the girls for 306 days of the year. Keith, just 59. That number jumps out like a red flag. Custody isn't handed out randomly. Custody is about stability, trust, and the court's perception of what's best for the children. And let's be honest, 59 days in a year is not shared parenting. That's visitation. That's holidays and weekends, not everyday life. What does that tell us about how this family was functioning long before Nicole ever filed the papers? Was Keith already absent? Already detached? Already, perhaps, living in a way that kept him away from his daughters more often than not? And let's not overlook the no child support clause. Neither Nicole nor Keith will pay child support. On paper, it makes sense. They're both wealthy, both capable of providing for their daughters. But it also strips away another layer of obligation, as if the marriage dissolved not just emotionally, but financially clean, each walking away with their own resources. It's almost chilling how transactional it all feels. 19 years of love and sacrifice, reduced to an agreement that neither will pay the other. A clean break. Or at least, as clean as divorce can ever be. But here's the detail that feels the most loaded, the non-disparagement clause. Neither Nicole nor Keith can speak badly of each other, or of family members, in front of their daughters. At first glance, it looks noble, even responsible. After all, children deserve protection from parental conflict. But doesn't it also speak volumes about the bitterness simmering beneath the surface? When lawyers have to write into law that parents cannot speak ill of one another, it suggests there was already a fear of it happening. It suggests the fracture wasn't just personal. It was toxic enough to potentially spill into the children's lives. And that's heartbreaking. And so, Chapter 5 of this story is not just about a divorce filing. It's about a moment when private heartbreak became public truth. It's about a woman choosing dignity over silence, even when it meant exposing her deepest wound. It's about the fragility of even the most glamorous marriages. And it leaves us with one searing question. If divorce papers could be filed so swiftly, so decisively, what exactly had been happening behind closed doors in the months, even years, leading up to that moment? Because the custody numbers, the clauses, the timing, none of this happens overnight. The divorce filing was not the beginning of the end. It was the end of the end, the final step in a collapse that had been silently unfolding for years. And in the next chapter, as we pull back the curtain on the custody arrangement itself, the truth about Nicole's role as a mother and Keith's absence as a father will reveal just how fractured this family had already become long before the court got involved. A mother's heart is a battlefield. When marriages collapse, love stories end, and trust shatters, one thing often rises above the ashes: the children. For Nicole Kidman, no amount of betrayal, no words as cruel as "you're difficult to love," no divorce filing in Nashville court could overshadow her devotion to her daughters, Sunday Rose, now 17, and Faith Margaret, now 14. And in Chapter 6 of this story, the focus turns from Nicole's heartbreak as a wife to her resilience as a mother. Because in the custody arrangement, in the cold calculation of days and nights spent with each parent, we see the clearest glimpse of what this marriage had become long before the divorce papers were filed. Let's start with the numbers. Nicole Kidman, 306 days. Keith Urban, 59 days. That's not shared parenting. That's not co-equal. That's not two parents balancing responsibilities and presence. That's an overwhelming tilt. Nicole with nearly the entire year. Keith with barely 2 months. Out of 365 days, Keith will spend less than 1/6 with his daughters. Think about that. What does it say about the structure of their family life that this arrangement wasn't contested, wasn't fought tooth and nail? What does it tell us about who was truly raising those girls, day in and day out? The truth is stark. Nicole has always been the anchor. She was the one waiting at home while Keith toured. She was the one balancing scripts and sets with school schedules and teenage milestones. She was the one ensuring stability while Keith, often absent, lived the restless life of a musician. And while to the outside world Keith played the role of devoted family man, dedicating songs, speaking warmly in interviews, flashing smiles on red carpets, the custody numbers reveal the deeper truth. Nicole was the constant. Keith was the visitor. But here's where it cuts even deeper. Custody agreements are not just about logistics. They are about judgment. Courts don't hand out 306 days versus 59 by accident. They look at stability, consistency, the child's best interests. If Nicole was awarded such overwhelming time, it signals a recognition that she has been the primary caregiver all along. Doesn't it sting, then, to imagine her hearing that she was difficult to love when she was the very person holding the family together? The irony is painful. The woman accused of being difficult is the same woman deemed essential for her children's lives. Now let's talk about the non-disparagement clause, the agreement that neither parent can speak badly about the other or their families in front of their daughters. On paper, it looks protective, shielding Sunday and Faith from the bitterness of adult conflict. But doesn't it also reveal how toxic things must have already become? That lawyers needed to intervene to prevent words from being used as weapons in front of the children. And let's not forget, words had already become weapons. Keith's phrase, "difficult to love," had wounded Nicole beyond repair. Imagine those daughters overhearing something like that. Imagine the damage it could do, not just to Nicole, but to the way they view themselves, their mother, their family. It's here that Nicole's maternal instinct shines through. She knows the stakes. She knows her daughters are old enough to understand the fracture in their family, old enough to sense the tension. So she takes the hit. She files decisively. She accepts the terms. She protects them with silence, with dignity. Because while Nicole may have lost her marriage, she refuses to lose her daughters to bitterness. Doesn't that reveal the heart of who she is? Not just an actress, not just a wife betrayed, but a mother determined to keep her children whole even as her world falls apart? But let's not romanticize it too much. Custody numbers tell a story, yes, but they also raise questions. Why just 59 days for Keith? Did he not fight for more? Did he accept this division willingly? Or was he unable, or perhaps unwilling, to offer the stability a court demanded? We can speculate, but the silence around Keith speaks volumes. For a man so celebrated for his love songs, for his tributes to Nicole and their family, his absence in these documents is deafening. Silence may shield him from criticism in the media, but in court, silence translates to surrender. And what of the daughters themselves? Sunday Rose, nearing adulthood at 17, and Faith Margaret, stepping into her teenage years at 14, are not toddlers. They are young women, capable of forming opinions, of noticing absence, of questioning loyalties. They've watched their parents' marriage unravel in real time. They've seen the public headlines, the speculation, the whispers. For them, this custody arrangement isn't just numbers, it's confirmation. Confirmation that their mother is their anchor, their father their visitor. How do you think that feels? How do you think they'll carry that knowledge into their own relationships one day? The parenting plan also states that Nicole and Keith will make major decisions regarding their daughters together. Education, health, religious upbringing. That sounds cooperative, doesn't it? But let's peel it back. What does it mean for two parents who couldn't agree on their marriage to now be tasked with agreeing on every major life choice for their daughters? It sounds like a battlefield waiting to happen. And yet, Nicole accepted it. Why? Because she knows the importance of unity, even if it's manufactured on paper. Even if it means swallowing pride. Even if it means enduring the voice of a man who told her she was difficult to love. And here's where the tragedy deepens. Nicole once dreamed of building a family she could hold close. After her divorce from Tom Cruise, she had lost daily contact with her adopted children, Connor and Isabella, who stayed largely with their father. That loss haunted her for years. She has spoken about it in rare, emotional interviews, her voice breaking as she described the pain of absence. With Sunday and Faith, she vowed not to repeat that mistake. This custody agreement, then, is more than legal. It's personal redemption. It's Nicole making sure history doesn't repeat itself. That no one, not Keith, not circumstance, takes her daughters away. But while Nicole may have secured her daughter's presence, what did it cost her? Think of the loneliness embedded in those 306 days. Yes, she has her girls, but she also carries the weight of being both parents most of the year. She will be the one navigating milestones, heartbreaks, graduations, and first loves. She will be the one absorbing their teenage storms, their questions, their pain. And she will do it knowing that their father, her former partner, is only there for fragments of the year. How heavy must that burden feel? How isolating must it be to parent alone, even when the other parent is alive and well? This chapter of the story isn't about glamour. It's not about red carpets or awards. It's about the raw, unfiltered reality of family. It's about a mother clinging to her daughters, determined to shield them from the destruction of her marriage. And it's about the bitter truth that in divorce, love stories end, but parenthood doesn't. You can file papers. You can divide assets. You can even divide time. But you can't divide the love of a mother who refuses to let her children go. And yet, as strong as Nicole's maternal instinct is, as protective as she remains, the reality of heartbreak cannot be erased. Because while Nicole may have gained custody, she lost something else. The illusion of being cherished by the man she built her world around. And in the days after the custody agreement was finalized, she did something she hadn't done in years. She broke her silence. And when she finally spoke, the words she chose pierced deeper than any court document could ever go. She stayed silent for years. She smiled through red carpets. She held Keith's hand at award shows. She cheered him on at concerts. She spoke politely in interviews, choosing her words carefully, never letting the cracks in her marriage bleed into the public eye. But every silence has an expiration date. And for Nicole Kidman, that date came after the divorce papers were filed, when she finally broke her silence and revealed the truth that had been clawing at her heart. Her words were simple, but devastating. I loved him until he told me I was difficult to love. Do you hear the weight in that confession? It isn't just a wife complaining about a fight. It isn't just a celebrity feeding tabloids. It's the kind of sentence that stops you in your tracks. Because it isn't about anger, it's about finality. I loved him until. That word marks the end. It draws a line in the sand. It tells us that love, no matter how fierce, has a limit when cruelty enters the room. And isn't that what makes it so haunting? Nicole Kidman, an actress with a reputation for dignity and grace, didn't scream, didn't lash out, didn't humiliate Keith with accusations. She just spoke her truth. A truth distilled down to one sentence that carried 19 years of sacrifice, betrayal, and heartbreak. And that restraint, choosing to reveal only this, makes her words even sharper. Because what else lies behind them? What other wounds? What other betrayals? What other moments of pain never made it to the public eye? Let's pause here and reflect. Why now? Why after years of silence did Nicole finally speak? The answer is layered. On one level, it was liberation. The divorce had been filed. The legal ties had been cut. She no longer had to protect the illusion of unity. On another level, it was necessity. Silence can protect you, but it can also eat you alive. And for Nicole, after being told she was difficult to love, silence became unbearable. She had to reclaim her narrative. She had to remind the world, and maybe herself, that she had loved fiercely, fully, until those words destroyed everything. And here's where the story cuts even deeper. Nicole Kidman is not just a wife. She's an icon. A woman who has played queens, lovers, mothers, and broken heroines on screen. She has given the world glimpses of vulnerability through characters. But this wasn't acting. This was Nicole herself, stripped bare. And in breaking her silence, she revealed something profoundly human. That even the most admired woman in Hollywood can be wounded by the person she trusted most. Doesn't that shake you? Doesn't it make you question how fragile love truly is? When she said, "I loved him until he told me I was difficult to love," Nicole did something extraordinary. She reframed the story. For months, the narrative had been about Keith moving on, about divorce papers, about custody. Cold, factual headlines. But with one sentence, Nicole made it emotional. She made it about betrayal, about heartbreak, about the cruelty of words. She gave the world not just information, but a feeling. And feelings, unlike facts, stick. It's important to understand what Nicole didn't say. She didn't accuse Keith of infidelity. She didn't air details of fights. She didn't spill secrets about money or control. She didn't try to drag him through the mud. That kind of silence is calculated. It's the silence of someone who knows the public doesn't need the messy details to understand the truth. All she needed was one sentence, and suddenly the world was on her side. But let's not forget the daughters. Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret are teenagers. Old enough to read headlines. Old enough to see their mother's words plastered across magazines, trending on social media, whispered in classrooms. How do you think they felt, seeing their mother's heartbreak made public? Do they resent Keith for what he said? Do they comfort Nicole, telling her she's not difficult to love? Or do they simply stay silent, caught between loyalty to both parents? And then there's Keith himself. His silence after Nicole's confession speaks louder than any response could. He didn't deny it. He didn't defend himself. He didn't clarify what he meant. And in that silence, the phrase difficult to love lingers as fact. Do you see how that works? In the absence of rebuttal, Nicole's truth becomes the truth. And the world, once enamored by their fairy tale, now sees Keith not as the devoted husband he once portrayed, but as the man who broke Nicole Kidman's heart with one cruel sentence. What makes Nicole's confession even more powerful is its universality. Who hasn't felt unlovable at some point? Who hasn't questioned their worth after rejection? Nicole's words don't just tell her story, they tell ours. They resonate with anyone who has ever given everything, only to be told it wasn't enough. And that resonance is why this story refuses to fade. Because when Nicole Kidman says she was told she's difficult to love, it forces us all to ask, if it can happen to her, could it happen to anyone? And that question, haunting, uncomfortable, unavoidable, is what keeps us hooked. It's what makes Nicole's silence-breaking moment not just a confession, but a cultural shockwave. Because it isn't just gossip. It isn't just Hollywood scandal. It's the stripping down of a universal truth. Love can wound, even when it looks perfect on the outside. But Nicole's confession isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new phase. Because after she spoke, after she revealed her heartbreak, the world turned its eyes to Keith. Would he respond? Would he defend himself? Would he show the same vulnerability? Or would his silence become the loudest indictment of all? And as the days passed, as fans speculated, as tabloids spun theories, one thing became clear. Nicole's words had shifted the narrative entirely. The image of a Hollywood power couple had been replaced by the image of a woman betrayed. And Keith's next move, or lack of one, would determine how the world judged him. The cameras flashed. The gowns sparkled. The smiles looked perfect. On red carpets, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban radiated what the world thought was true love. They were the picture of glamour, the Oscar-winning actress and the country music superstar, walking hand in hand, whispering in each other's ears, exchanging looks that melted audiences. To the outside world, theirs was a love story that transcended fame and the brutal odds of celebrity marriages. But what happens when the public persona becomes a costume? When the smiles are rehearsed, the glances staged, the affection more performance than truth? That's what Chapter 8 is about. The dangerous divide between the illusion of perfection and the reality of a marriage unraveling behind closed doors. Think about it. How many times did we see Nicole and Keith on red carpets together, laughing like teenagers in love? How many magazine covers praised them as one of Hollywood's most stable couples? How many interviews featured Keith dedicating songs to Nicole, or Nicole calling Keith her soulmate? And how many of us believed it? Isn't it chilling to look back now and realize how convincing that performance was? Here's the bitter irony. Nicole is one of the greatest actresses of her generation. But when it came to her marriage, she wasn't acting for the cameras. She was trying to survive. She was trying to project strength, loyalty, and devotion, even when cracks were forming. And Keith, a natural showman, played his role too. The doting husband, the reformed man who had been saved by Nicole, the loving father. Together, they sold the image of a perfect couple, and the world bought it. But images lie. And that's what makes this chapter so powerful. Because the contrast between their glamorous public appearances and their painful private reality is staggering. While Nicole dazzled at premieres, she was privately struggling with feelings of betrayal. While Keith crooned love songs to her on stage, he was allegedly telling her behind closed doors that she was difficult to love. How's that for a contradiction? How's that for a betrayal? Not just of Nicole, but of every fan who believed in their story. Let's dig deeper. Why do celebrities feel pressured to maintain perfect facades? The truth is, Hollywood thrives on illusions. The audience wants to believe in fairy tales, and celebrities are expected to play along. Nicole and Keith became the embodiment of that fantasy, a glamorous marriage built on devotion and longevity. But behind every photo, there were sleepless nights. Behind every affectionate interview quote, there were fights. Behind every perfect couple headline, there was a woman slowly realizing she was giving everything to a man who might not value it. And doesn't that resonate beyond Hollywood? How many of us put on smiles at dinner parties, post happy photos on social media, hold hands in public, all while hiding the truth of a relationship in crisis? Nicole and Keith's story is just a magnified version of what so many couples experience, the exhausting effort of keeping up appearances when the foundation is already cracking. Here's where it gets darker. The illusion wasn't just for the public, it was for Nicole too. By clinging to the image of perfection, she was also trying to convince herself. She wanted to believe the sacrifices were worth it. She wanted to believe that Keith saw her loyalty, her devotion, her sacrifices. She wanted to believe the red carpet smiles were real. And for years, maybe that illusion gave her strength. But illusions can only hold so long. Eventually, the truth breaks through, and when it does, the crash is deafening. Nicole's confession about Keith's words strips away the illusion completely. Suddenly, all those red carpet appearances look different. Suddenly, the smiles look forced. Suddenly, the perfect couple narrative collapses under the weight of one devastating phrase: difficult to love. It's like watching a movie and realizing the twist ending reframes everything you thought you knew. Every moment of public affection is now cast in doubt. Was Keith performing? Was Nicole protecting herself? Was any of it real? And yet, let's not underestimate the cost of maintaining that public illusion. It takes energy to keep smiling when your heart is breaking. It takes strength to answer interview questions about your wonderful husband when you've cried yourself to sleep the night before. It takes resilience to walk red carpets together, arm in arm, when you know your marriage is already crumbling. Nicole carried that burden with grace. But grace has a price, and eventually, she couldn't pay it anymore. The irony is almost cinematic. The actress who made her career out of playing complex, broken, vulnerable woman was now living her own tragedy off-screen. And the man she loved, the man she defended, the man she built her world around, was part of the script that ended with betrayal.